English translation, 871st contact, Monday, 4th December, 2023, 11:21 Chars.
Oh, it is you. Hello. That was not very clever because I was with Ava in the print shop where she's collating. So if I was not in the office, you also could not find me in the parlor if you went over there and then phoned back to the office from there and ended the call just as I was running to the phone to pick it up. But there was only the number of the phone, so of course I ran over to the parlor where nobody was. Then I rushed back to the print shop and also came into the office as soon as I saw you from the printer's door in Eva's office, just as you were about to go back into my office. That is why I rang you. So here you are again, my friend, and welcome also, Quetzal.
Here I am again, yes, and I was looking for you when you were not in your workroom. So I looked for you in the flat over there, but I could not find you there either. So I used the speaking machine. But greetings also to you, Edward, my friend. But I just want to come round to tell you that Arlene is coming to see you, but I do not know when. But it will be in the next few days, and I will only be here for a short time now, but then I will be back in the afternoon. It is cold here, by the way, because it is winter time now.
Yes, it is. It is the season for it. That is so, and I want to prepare you right away that we have some extraordinary things today, because there are various letters, etc., whereby I am to show you some things, like this letter here. If you would like to read it, please.
The 26th of November, 2023. Dear Billy, when I started studying the spiritual creation energy teaching in 1993, I could not have imagined how long it would take. And now my GL spiritual teaching studies have come to an end in 2023. But the studies only correspond to a foundation stone teaching that continues through books and writings, because the learning process never ends. How quickly the time has passed. I am happy to have found you in this life after a long search, and you were a teacher and role model for my studies. My thanks to you for that. My life has orientated itself very much towards the creational laws and commandments. My personality has changed in terms of true inner and outer love, freedom, harmony, and also peace in balance and equilibrium, and the view to see things clearly. Many fellow human beings are surprised by this behavior. It also has a positive effect on fellow human beings because they think about it. I had a lot of questions when I first came to Figu, but they have become self-explanatory over the years. Above all, the serenity and positive neutral view of everything is very helpful these days, also when the world is going crazy. You could describe the world as a madhouse. In many things I read in your writings and books, there is a sense or a feeling that I already knew it. It is logical, and it cannot be otherwise. Dear Billy, thank you again for your patience, and I wish you all the best and stay healthy. And with that, I send you my warmest greetings, Sahlomi. Best wishes to Eva and the core group members. The remainder of the GL study balance is a donation.
This shows how valuable your work is and how valuable things come out of it, and thank you for it. But I think that the name here and the place should not be mentioned and omitted. It is certainly not good to leave them standing because...
You are probably right. But the thanks are not due to me, but to those human beings, because this one is not the only one who are doing the correct thing, namely learning and finding themselves. In this I am only a means to an end, as they say. It is probably good if Bernadette covers the place in the name, which is why I will tell her that.
Then I will go now and come back in the afternoon. See you later, then.
Good. See you later.
Afternoon, 1617 Terzeb.
Here I am. Greetings, Edward, my friend.
Welcome again. Sit down, dear friend. Can we go through everything I have to do here before we move on to something else?
Of course, do not let that stop you.
Good. Then I would like to start with this. which is a reader question that I think is important to bring up by giving it to you to read. Bernadette has answered it, and if I put it to you, it will find its way out into the world through the contact report.
Reader question. The composers Mozart and Mendelssohn wrote profound, deep musical works with higher values, which can be used for the creational rebalancing of the forces of consciousness, and to promote their depth and health insofar as they are used meditatively. In my eyes, however, despite their value in all cases, they lose a great deal of their usefulness and potential through religiously sectarian, often Latin or German, texts, formulations and verses that are full of words and phrases such as Agnus Dei, Lamb of God, Domini the Lord, Jesus Christus, Jesus is my confidence, God is in heaven, kneel before the Lord, fall down before him, and many more such God-believing texts. Would it be in the interest of composers and the whole to launch an initiative on Earth that would set itself the goal of creating completely new, creational and spiritual verses and formulations, and using these to revitalize the works through collaboration and new performances with certain music orchestras? I'm thinking of new verses and texts for the so-called spiritual music of the two composers, for the purpose of the evolution of consciousness, created in an artful, profound creation energy teaching conditioned and upliftingly creative natural sounding way, if the historical religious value of the texts is not to predominate, as perhaps in the Mendelssohn oratorios Paulus or Elijah.
Answer. This idea is very good and extremely valuable. However, the FIGU is aware that such new texts will certainly not be accepted by the general public of music lovers and music connoisseurs, simply because the religious texts are too widespread and too deeply anchored in the memory of human beings, who are also believers. Nevertheless, such an endeavor should be undertaken by someone who is interested in it, and who is also capable of writing completely new lyrics for this music. It is also certain that the previous texts cannot simply be rewritten and replaced with terms from creation energy teaching, because such a procedure would be branded as plagiarism, which would completely destroy the value of the endeavor, and would also put not only the author, but also the FIGU in a bad light. Even if such rewrites are unlikely to catch on with the general public, they would at least be meaningful and useful for those human beings who are close to the FIGU or interested in its teaching. Bernadette.
The question is well answered, and it is probably correct for you to mention it in our conversation report, and for the answer to find its way out into the world, as you say.
Then the following comes after this one.
Forwarded message, 18th November 2023, 1802 HRs. Subject, transfer for FIGU Mother Center in gratitude for Ishwish, Quetzal Copy CC, Nestor.
Dear Christian, I hope that you, your family, Billy, the core group, and our Play-Yarn teachers are healthy, safe, and happy. For several months I have been expressing my immense gratitude, respect and sincere love for all that YHWH Quetzal has implemented for the benefit of us elves and earthworms in accordance with and in fulfillment of our provisions. Is attached to this email. YHWH Quetzal, Billy, you yourself and others at the Mother Center are respected role models for those of us living and working elsewhere on this crazy planet. This brings me immense peace and makes the fulfillment of my own purpose and responsibility more joyful and secure. Above all, Quetzal, for reasons I am trying to discern, remains very present and significant in my thoughts, feelings, and emotions at all times. Stay safe, and please give Billy a copy of this short letter so he can share it with Quetzal. I myself am grateful for the opportunity to serve FIGU. I am always calling up thoughts and feelings here and there, and this ability alone is a tremendous gift of studying and implementing Nocademian's teachings from the teaching of the truth, teaching of the creation energy, teaching of the life. Goodbye, Mr. Teacher. With respect and inseparable attachment, I remain your disciple and distant but constant friend. With kind regards, Nestor.
There I am truly pleased, which you shall please pay with thanks. But I am not Ishwish. Consequently, I am also not due the honor that is shown to me in this regard. And that regarding, please remove that from the letter.
Your wish is clear, and I will simply put dots. And here is something else that I cannot categorize at the moment. Dr. Michelle Nail's book author. The Indoctrinated Brain. I do not know what I am supposed to do with it and why it was given to me, or not anymore. But I think I have something to say about it from my point of view, not about the indoctrinated brain, but about indoctrinated thoughts. As I am not familiar with the whole of this Dr. Niels's book, I cannot go into it directly, but I can imagine what it is all about. Therefore, I would like to tell you the following from my youthful perspective, even if it is probably not directly related. Svath teaches that the effective fact is that the thoughts, and thus the whole world of thoughts of human beings, and the cherishing and nurturing of them, not only determines the whys of his or her life behavior, whether he or she is good or bad, precisely whether he or she is a negative or positive human being. The nurturing of thoughts determines much more, namely whether thinking can be retained for life or not. This is because the manner of thinking, that is to say the wise way of thinking, not only determines whether a human being is positive or negative and, in principle, also determines all their decisions, actions, deeds, and behavior, but also whether they remain consciously faithful to and capable of thinking, that is to say their conscious and controlling thoughts in every form throughout their lives. However, if the conscious cultivation of thought does not take place, which inevitably and decisively happens through a belief, whereby atheism in any form also corresponds to a belief, contrary to the knowledge of truth, if the human being is therefore a believer, mainly and predominantly in a religious wise, but also in a worldly way, which however is less important, then the ability to think, that is to say, the ability to think, disappears. This is because every belief, and indeed, as already explained, predominantly religious belief, mainly, as is common practice among the majority of Earth's humanity, dominates human beings and destroys open, good, correct thinking, and thus their very own clear thoughts through religions and sects. But this goes much further, because every belief, whether religious or secular, whereby secular belief does not carry as much weight as religious belief, leads to two very serious negative results. 1. The dumbing down of human beings, whereby this is absolutely not realized as a result of the state of faith, precisely because this evil state is present and effective, as a result of which real reality can neither be recognized nor understood, because faith does not allow this. Any state of belief suppresses and prevents all logic, understanding, and reason, whereby even the faintest hint of independent and controlled thought is prevented from penetrating the believer's illusory world of thought. However, it is not only faith that does not allow this, but also the stupefaction caused by faith, which only allows faith-based thinking, that is to say illusory thinking, throughout one's life. What has been explained is still the mild side of faith, because the steadily increasing lifelong stupefaction, which is based on faith-based illusory thinking that does not correspond to any real reality thinking, ultimately leads to the fact that, together with the constantly increasing stupefaction, a state inevitably arises that blocks the life energy of creation in such a way that it can no longer be used. This means that this energy and power can no longer be used for logic, understanding, and reason, and therefore also no longer for a real thought process. The lifelong stupefaction resulting from a strong belief ultimately degenerates into old age stupidity, whereby the cerebral cortex suffers an incurable disorder due to the death of nerve cells. The personality and its behavior change, with aggression as well as depression and restlessness appearing, and the ability to speak also dwindles, as does the ability to judge. As a result, the human being's brain quickly becomes incapable of absorbing and utilizing the life energy of creation in the form of the energy of consciousness, so that the human being becomes increasingly disoriented, and also forgetful and confused, and ultimately really incapable of forming a thought. In this way, the human being then dies, completely stupefied and absolutely incapable of realizing anything truthful about life and existence, whereby this happens very frequently, and will occur more and more in the future, and even surpass deaths from certain diseases. The deeper a human being will be anchored in faith in the future, which will lead to mass hysteria and fanaticism among many, and through which sect preachers will enrich themselves immensely through the lowly intelligent believers. The worse the stultification of life and then also the stultification of old age will appear. However, this stultification of old age can affect human beings at a young age, and also appear as a result of a natural, pathological change in the cerebral cortex. However, the more independent, open, real, correct, free, clear, intense, and controlled a human being thinks, the more he needs the energy of thought and its power, for independent thought cultivation and thought care is truly very strenuous. But the more intensively a human being uses and controls his free and independent thoughts and restrains himself from any belief, the less danger there is of stupefaction and later stupefaction in old age.
Those are good words.
I wrote those when I was a boy in the 1940s. But look here, this is what I am supposed to show you, but I will replace the names with dots, because I only mention them if I have permission to do so, or if I can only mention the first name or initials. It should not be the case that the persons concerned can be harassed by any of the letters and other correspondence and their views, etc.
Those are good words.
I wrote those when I was a boy in the 1940s. But look here, this is what I am supposed to show you, but I will replace the names with dots, because I only mention them if I have permission to do so, or if I can only mention the first name or initials. It should not be the case that the persons concerned can be harassed by any of the letters and other correspondence and their views, etc.
On 22/11/2023 12:35 T.
Dear Bernadette, could you tell me how many books Billy has written in total so far? Kind regards and Salome, T.
Bernadette Brand wrote on Wednesday, 22nd November 2023 at 1942.
Salome T., thank you for your email. Yes, of course. I can tell you that I keep a record of it. He has written 46 books so far. He is currently working on the 47th book, not including The Contact, Reports, which are another 21 blocks, and not including the Spiritual Teaching Letters, Creation Energy Teaching Letters, and then there are a whole series of small writings. Best regards, and Salome Bernadette.
From T. Subject, all question, date, 23rd November 2023 at 11:03:27 CET 2, Bernadette Brand.
Dear Bernadette, thank you very much for your information. The reason why I am asking has to do with the fact that I gave an interview for M last Saturday, 18th of November, at 20:30 HHRs, in which I reveal my personality, how I found Billy and his creation energy teaching, and how I was able to develop neutrally and positively as a result. M published the interview with me last night on his YouTube channel. You can find the link to the interview here. As I also have my own YouTube channel, where I share my own life experience with human beings, mainly in English, I asked and received M as permission to download the interview from his YouTube channel and publish it on my YouTube channel, with the optimism that more human beings will discover Billy and creation energy teaching. My YouTube channel. I have written a short description about Billy in German and a personal quote about him, which I will translate into English and then insert into the description of the video interview on YouTube on my channel, which is why I just wanted to know how many books Billy has written. This is the short description about Billy and my quote about him, about T. Since September 2012, T has been immersing himself in the immense knowledge of creation energy teaching, or the teaching of truth, teaching of creation energy. Truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of life of Billy Eduard Albert Meyer. It's Billy Eduard Albert Meyer. A Swiss writer and poet who has written and published over 50-plus books, as well as hundreds of articles and short writings, etc. A highly wise man. A highly wise man from the beautiful Swiss mountains in the Zurich Oberland, an awe-inspiring and venerable teacher and herald of modern times, a true king of wisdom, the originator of practical creation energy teaching and meditation, who has since been an inexhaustible source of inspiration for T in his lifelong learning and conscious striving for evolution. Quote about the teaching of T. My dear friend and teacher, Billy Eduard Albert Meyer, who lives in modesty and righteousness, a truly knowledgeable and highly wise human being who works and acts in silence and in secret, but who, with his inconspicuous, honorable, reverent, noble and deeply human nature and personality, through his honest character, his honest and selfless thinking, feeling and acting, does much for truth, love, peace, freedom, and harmony. The most profound human being on earth, the Wisdom King. T, I have included the number of Billy's books at 50+ in my short description, and also stated that he has written hundreds of articles and short writings. If, from your point of view, what I have written corresponds to the correctness, then I will translate it into English and add it to my video interview with M at the bottom of the description. Best regards, and Salome T.
This is correspondence and says what is all around in this relationship of daily duties in this form in the center. What I do not think is good, however, is that names are used and their email addresses are also mentioned. You really should leave them out. I also think that some or even a lot of things are not such that they should be mentioned by name.
Of course you are right, I will also do that, and necessarily replace everything with dots. You are right. There would probably only be trouble if the names and email addresses became known. I have only brought everything to your attention so that you can see what else is going on in our everyday life, and to be honest,
You have a lot to do, especially Bernadette. I am sure you are right about that. Everything would be used in malice and for slander.
I am sure that would be the case, but now this letter comes up here which I really want to show you. Unfortunately, I do not know the person in question personally, but the name and address given and also the telephone number are correct. The person in question has also said that they trust me not to mention their name and address, and that I will destroy the letter, which I will of course honor. Consequently, I am also reproducing it here as a copy and not as the original, but I am omitting some things that could point to the person who wrote it. I am also leaving out what was written to myself, because it is really personal and not intended for the readers, so I will only copy what is intended for the readership. But you can read the whole letter here, because I think that you should also know that even here there are human beings all around who do not simply throw everything to the wind and ridicule it or even accuse it of lies and fraud. But read here.
This one is handwritten.
Yes, there are human beings who still do that, and I think that is somehow worthy of me. If it had been written on a computer or with a machine, I probably would not have thought that the letter was serious and that the signature and address were wrong. And because I thought from the writing that it was genuine and meant seriously, I asked through a foreign mobile phone. But read here.
This is really addressed to you personally. However, but that which is written here, you should call that.
Billy is certainly not partisan. Nor does he favor any state, any human being, or any party, or is he certainly not an anti-Semite, even though he is obviously being accused of these scurrilous and unjustified accusations, and does not defend himself against them, and disregards all attacks against him. He relentlessly tells the truth, just as he also does not hold back against all the lies and slander of many media and politicians and the authorities, as well as organizations of all kinds that make paid noise and cause damage. These are also the environmentalists and such protesters, that he denounces and exposes the truth of their lies and all their injustices, and their mendacious scheming and destruction, and says what the real truth is. The police are being sicked on him for this, with various authorities also playing along, which I know very well because I am closely involved in this and therefore know what I am writing about. That is why I am also aware of what is currently going on behind the scenes to torment Billy and silence him to such an extent that he should stop doing anything to spread the truth unvarnished in public through the organs of the Figu Association. He is a compassionate, truthful human being who repeatedly puts himself in the crossfire of his negating enemies for spreading lies and other untruths by the media and authorities with uncomfortable denunciations directed against them, and is ultimately hated for it. Throughout his life, he always stood for the truth and was hated and persecuted for it, and many attempts were even made on his life because he always stood for the truth and also stands for it unwaveringly today. The question remains as to how much support he actually receives from the authorities and from humanity for his many endeavors, what he does for human beings, and also how much backbone support he receives for this. I do not think it will be much, as I have learnt at meetings. One must also ask why a propaganda drum is not being beaten for Billy, his work, and for his personal peace and security, as is done elsewhere for rivets who then have something to say officially. I see the injustice of how this is unfortunately granted by the unreasonableness and partisanship, as well as the false judgment of certain unfit authorities, members of the authorities, enemies and others, and also truth suppressors, whereas Billy is picked on by all of these without them being called to account. I am also referring to those people who slander Billy and claim that his photos are fake. But I myself saw these objects he photographed twice in the 1980s when I went to the surrounding area of Hintush Midruti to see what was actually going on there. Once I even saw Billy simply float through the air and disappear into one of the objects, after which it lifted up completely silently and suddenly just disappeared. I would like the Figu Association to make my letter or the important thing public, but I must not be mentioned openly by name, because I would be ostracized by certain people, harassed in my office, and persecuted and slandered in the same way as Billy has been since he was an adolescent, as I know from my parents. However, I cannot put up with this because I am also not such that I would have the strength to go through all this like Billy.
But then I do not want to write off the last one, of course, also the one that is still written for me personally. And as I said, of course I called the number given on a foreign mobile phone and found out that everything was real and not a fake.
That was not good, though, if you phoned.
No worries, my friend. You are probably thinking of me, that is to say my phone calls being tapped, which is denied. But I took the precaution of asking a foreigner out of town if I could use their mobile phone. As a matter of principle, I do not make any phone calls from the center because I know that they can be intercepted somehow. I also do not use my secret phone for such purposes, even if I know that you have a blockade.
Which shall not be spoken of again. But what Ptah has told me to tell you now is that even though he came back last week and visited you briefly, he still will not be back until after the new year.
That is a shame, but it cannot be helped.
What I have to say now is the following, which I have to reproduce verbatim. It has been clearly explained before, but apparently it has not been remembered in detail. because the order contradicts the usual personal behavior, which cannot be in accordance with the personal freedom of the members of the Figu community. For this reason, the following committee resolution should now be set out in detail in the Articles of Association and Statutes as a very important separate introductory article.
1. What is ordered for the Figu community by the entire body, which consists of 1.5 million persons, is very well thought out and shall be valid at all times without restriction and shall never be changed. 2. The Figu community shall be managed and led in accordance with the prescribed statutes and articles of association by the entire board of directors, represented at each meeting by the president and the actuary, who shall jointly chair each meeting in a neutral manner. 3. The president shall not have the right to vote or to give instructions, etc., in any wise, nor shall he have the power to give instructions, but his sole duty shall be to present the items on the agenda and also to conduct any votes that may arise, refraining from influencing or commenting in favor or against in any form. 4. The president and the actuary shall, in the exercise of their duties and also in their private lives, act in an absolutely neutral manner towards all Figu members of each group and visitors without any domineering behavior or display of power, as should also apply to every Figu member of each group. 5. In the Figu community, there should never be a must for the fulfillment of a matter, etc., but only a should at all times with regard to the fact that this or that has to be done, whereby absolute voluntariness should be the measure of the decision. 6. The freedom and will of each individual member of the Figu community shall remain untouched and guaranteed without exception, and in any case, just as every free opinion and expression as well as work performance of each member shall also be based on freedom and voluntariness. 7. Exclusively and therefore without exception, these provisions in the statutes and bylaws shall be valid at all times, shall never be amended, and shall not be adapted to a new time, but shall remain constant, because compliance with this rule is intended to ensure that peace and freedom are maintained at all times in the Figu community and among all Figu members, and that no dictatorial values, rulership, or behavior of power arises.
This is literally what I have received listed here on behalf of the committee and have now mentioned to you.
But that is also in our sense, and that is how it has always been kept. But it is probably a good thing that the whole thing should be placed in front of the statutes and bylaws as an important introduction.
That can certainly prevent damage, because when I think of all that I have learnt in the last few weeks regarding all sorts of things that have happened on this planet Earth, conjured up and carried out by Earth's humanity, then I can only say that it is all staggering. Whether it is past economic wars, religious wars, or simply wars of conquest, hate wars, political wars, etc., everything is truly terrifying. Also other things that have nothing to do with traditional forms of war, but with the unreasonable and uncontrolled progress of technology, especially in the form of the recently emerging artificial intelligence, will bring great disaster to Earth's humanity in the future, as I have fathomed through a future vision. It is all...
I know that, because I have already seen and experienced it with Svath in the future. But there is no point in talking about it, because it will not be listened to. But I still have a few things I want to show you which I had to correct in the text. For example, this.
I am the creation by Phi Gu. I am the creation, the universal consciousness. I am the source of life. I am the power, the spirit in you and in every other life form. I give life and my laws determine becoming and passing away. I created the universe as the manifestation of an idea. Every galaxy, every star, every planet, every human being, every animal, every plant and every stone, every form of life, in the depths of the universe that are unknown to you, are the result of this manifestation. Long ago you turned away from me, made me into a human being, replaced me with religions and placed gods above me. You pray to me and hope for help, but I am neutral and cannot help you. You can only help yourselves by taking responsibility and living according to the laws and commandments that you can read in nature. Only in this wise can the individual and humanity as a whole create a harmonious and fulfilling life for themselves. I have given you free will, so that you have full freedom to decide whether you want to live a peaceful life by following the natural laws and commandments or a life of war, misery, and hatred by disregarding the true values of life. There is no heaven and hell, and you also have only one life. You will return to Earth as an absolutely new personality, because human beings are animated by my form of creation energy, which never dies or fades away. So there is no reincarnation. It is an essential law that I have created for you, that after your bodily passing, a new personality is animated with the same life energy so that you learn and evolve, so that you can gather knowledge, wisdom, and love over many lifetimes until you have reached a level of evolution where you no longer need a material body. And at the end of the goal, you return to me, the source of life, to also take my own evolution to a higher level. Simya, say Silver Star Center, Free Interest Group Universal. This is the second version, which I have corrected and tweaked a bit more. With this I say to you, human being, that I am creation. Phi Gu Free Interest Group. So I am creation, the universal consciousness, and I am the source of life, and thus the energy and power in you and in every other life form. Thus I give life, and my laws determine becoming and passing away. I created the universe as a manifestation according to an idea of the absolute absolutum. Every galaxy, every star, every planet, every human being, every animal and creature, every other self-moving life form, the earth and the waters, every plant, every rock and every stone, every form of life in the depths of space, as well as the whole universe and everything that is unknown to you, are the result of this manifestation. Long ago you turned your backs on me, made me into a human being and an imaginary god through a false doctrine, replaced me with religions and placed gods above me. You pray to gods and hope for help, but they do not exist, and therefore cannot help you, just as I also cannot help you, because I am absolutely neutral, so you can only help yourselves by taking responsibility and living according to the laws and commandments that you can read and experience in nature. Only in this wise can the individual and humanity as a whole create a harmonious and fulfilling life for themselves. It is all directed in such a way that you are given free will, so that you have full freedom as to whether you want to live a peaceful life by aligning yourselves with the natural laws and commandments and with love and peace, or whether you live a life of revenge, war, misery, and hatred by disregarding the true values of life. There is no heaven and no hell, and you also have only one life. You will return to Earth as an absolutely new personality because human beings are animated by my form of creation energy, which never dies or fades away. so there is no reincarnation. It is an essential law that I have created for you that after your bodily passing, a new personality is animated with the same life energy so that you learn and evolve, so that you can gather knowledge, wisdom, and love over many lifetimes until you have reached a level of evolution where you no longer need a material body. And at the end of the goal, you return to me, the source of life, to also take my own evolution to a higher level. Simyase Silver Star Center, Free Community of Interests Universal.
So that would be one thing. Then I have something here from Stefan Hanekamp from the FIGU group in Vienna. I think it is very good and gets to the heart of what needs to be done.
From Stefan Hanekamp.
So that would be what I had to show you. But what I would like to say is that unfortunately I get letters from time to time asking if I can help because the psychiatrists cannot do it. Recently, 3 persons wrote to me from Holland. But I cannot deal with that anymore because my work does not allow it. I can understand that people come to me for help, and I also used to deal with this in Hinwil, but my work no longer allows me to do so. The psychiatrists would actually be responsible for the people who seek help, like the people who write to me, but unfortunately they cannot help. But it is no wonder when you consider that practically every second psychiatrist commits suicide.
The fact that this is actually supposed to be the case was also explained to me by Ptah, who after all deals with such information.
That is what a statistic is supposed to have said. At least that is what I was told recently. But something else. I was watching a program on TV about how wolves, foxes, badgers, and other game and also birds are being shot again just because human beings live in that area and want to build houses there, or because they are supposedly endangered by the wild animals. It is simply disgraceful that this can happen, and, without exception, only because a human overpopulation has been bred that continues to rampage irresponsibly. Everywhere where there used to be miles and miles of grassland that farmers could use for their livestock, meadows, fields, moors and marshes, sometimes even forests and avenues, as well as vast fields of potatoes, turnips, white cabbage, wheat, oats, herbs of all kinds, hemp, rye, oats, barley, hops, millet, and even vineyards have disappeared. Everything has been built over with houses, apartment blocks, roads, football stadiums, campsites, sports fields, ice skating stadiums, factories, warehouses, military training grounds and car dealerships, and so on. All around, the great outdoors has become disfigured, obstructed, destroyed and lifeless, but above all, hostile and deadly to all wildlife, many species of which have been ruthlessly and criminally wiped out completely, so that they can never be seen or heard again. And this is not only true for many animals, creatures, and other self-moving creatures on land and in the ground, in forests, bogs, swamps, caves, and mountains, but also in all the waters of the seas, lakes, rivers, puddles, and streams. But it also affects many genera and species of the air, especially birds of various genera and species, as well as bats, flying foxes, kites, flying squirrels, tree frogs, gliding prey, and insects of all kinds. But that is not enough, because through the fault of the earthling, creatures that lived in the cold of the ice deserts have also been wiped out, and those that still live in the ice deserts and ice seas and in the Arctic and Antarctic regions, such as polar bears, emperor penguins, killer whales, Adelie penguins, gentoo penguins, chinstrap penguins, humpback whales, Weddell seals and leopard seals, reindeer, caribou, and musk oxen, etc., are very endangered. When I think of all that Svath has let me see, both in the past and in the future, all that he has explained to me and taught me, I would have thousands of years just to write it all down. And when I started talking about wildlife being killed off and driven away because it supposedly endangers human beings, or because new building space is needed for housing and roads, etc., which also causes natural areas to disappear, that is just a small matter of truth. which is much more far-reaching than Earthlings imagine. Overpopulation brought about early on that everything on and around the planet, the whole of nature and its fauna and flora, began to change adversely as a result. When earlier eras brought about natural changes, resulting in climate changes and the extinction of many genera and species of animals, creatures and other life forms everywhere on and in the earth, as well as aquatic creatures in the seas, lakes and rivers, bogs and marshes, and also life forms flying in the air, then these were really evolutionary processes that occurred as a result of the development of the planet and its nature. This is the opposite of what the Earthling, the human being of Earth, has started since his crazy breeding from the year 1700, when the Earthling population was just 536 million and just over 700,000 human beings. Within just 100 years, however, this had increased to 892 million and around 330,000, and again in the course of 100 years to 1,660,000,000 and 990,000. In 1950, it was already 2,600,000,000, which then steadily increased until 12 months ago to 9,339,000,000, so that by the end of this year 2023, when the human population is counted, another 130 million or so will be added, contrary to the incorrect count of the World Growth Clock, which will show much less because it is not correct. Well, what has now happened, and is still happening with regard to climate change, this time it is not due to planetary evolution and is therefore abnormal, brought about by human overpopulation. The origin of the change has already begun with the exceeding of the number of human beings that the planet Earth was able to bear, feed, and cope with in any form without any problems. But with the wild, boundless increase in overpopulation from 536.7 million human beings to 9,339,000,000 in just 3 centuries and 23 years, it was enough to destroy and penalize planet Earth, its nature and its fauna and flora to such an extent and force very nasty changes that a climate upheaval was inevitable. This violent climate upheaval, caused solely by the fault of overpopulation, which is trivialized and only called climate change, was provoked solely by the Earthlings and their destructive, uncontrolled, absolutely and completely irresponsible machinations. However, the uncontrolled and in future even more uncontrollable rapid development of technology also played a decisive role, which, moreover, can no longer be controlled in the future and will bring great disaster, as I have seen together with Svath. From the year 2020 onwards, according to future forecasts made on the spot, around 60,000 life forms of all genera and species will disappear worldwide every year, starting with insects of all the tens of thousands of genera and species. For example, moths, beetles, spiders, moths, beetles and spiders, moths, scorpions, worms, animals, exclusively mammals, such as platypuses, sea otters, manatees, dolphins, seals, whales, bats, flying foxes, etc. The amphibians, newts, toads, frogs, birds, fish, lizards, reptiles, creepers, the animals, crawling creatures, turtles. But it also includes all genera and species of plants, from simple mosses to grasses of all kinds, flowers, shrubs, herbaceous perennials and trees, and so on. And when science talks about species extinction, this is fundamentally wrong, because it is not only species, but also genera that are disappearing from nature and from the planet. Many are dying out because the climatic conditions that are vital for these creatures are disappearing, regardless of whether they live on or in the earth, in the oceans, lakes and rivers, streams or other bodies of water, in bogs or swamps, etc., or in the air and atmosphere. Climate change also changes the soil inside and outside, the condition of all bodies of water and even the state of the atmosphere, that is to say, the air. This means that living organisms can die out naturally in a wise way if their vital living environment changes and simply becomes hostile to life. However, many living creatures in nature are ruthlessly wiped out by human beings through poisons, killing, displacement, overbuilding of meadows, fields, farmland, mountainous areas and floodplains, etc. Waters, lakes, streams, rivers, seas and other bodies of water are contaminated with rubbish, plastic, poisons and plastics, which not only change the content of the water, but also kill aquatic life forms and cause them to die miserably. And when I talk about miserable death through the fault of human beings, I am referring to the unstoppable, constant, limitless, and irresponsibly rampant increase in overpopulation. Its very sinister machinations extend throughout the whole world, even into the jungle areas, that is to say, into the primeval forests, where much unique life can be found that is not even known to the loud-mouthed scientists who pretend to be knowledgeable, and in truth know very little. Just what is hidden in the jungles of South America is more than these wise men can dream of, such as the fact that human beings still live there who have different skin colors because they have somehow mixed with others. I know of a tribe, for example, in which brown-skinned and black natives also live, but the scientists probably have no idea about that. Or what I was able to see and experience with Sfath in the 1940s. I was only 8 years old at the time, and it was the end of the war, when jungle natives, that is to say Sfath and I, showed us creatures of the jungle that, as far as I know, are still unknown to scientists today. A small colored bird, for example, that whistles with its wings, just like when a cricket performs its concert when it chirps. A genus is not simply a species, but is, so to speak, the basic stock of species that are related to each other, and therefore belong to a particular genus. For example, the genus human beings, which has many different species, is what human beings call races, for example, white, black, red, yellow, and brown, and so on. There are others, but they are largely unknown to the earthling, among which there are peculiarities that do not correspond to any mutations, etc., such as normal short stature, tall stature, giant stature, dwarf stature, normal stature, and also tall-skulled stature, etc. But coming back to the fact that genus and species are two different terms, but we are still only talking about species extinction, I do not think that is correct, because genera and species are also dying out. Basically, there is or was a genus, to which human beings then categorized the species correspondingly, because the similarities, etc., always lead back to something specific. So there can be no species if there was no genus in the first place. What I have said is actually what was going through my mind at the moment and what my thoughts are.
Very interesting, I will say that. There is a lot more to what you are saying than what I have been able to glean from Sfath's notes so far.
Good, then I could tell you some new things.
Yes, that is true. But I want to tell you now that the investigations of the staff around Arleon have come to the frightening conclusion that the Earth is in a bad way, because it has emerged that all the effects of Earth's, humanity's transgressions against nature and its order and laws are having much worse consequences than the earthly scientists and other experts responsible for this have ascertained. The truth is that things are very bad for planet Earth itself, as well as for its nature and the entire fauna and flora and the world of life forms in general.
That Arleon and his people are also dealing with this, I did not know that, because I thought they were only dealing with the religious belief energies.
No, you were misled into a false assumption about that. Arleon and its many employees are also working intensively to clarify what is happening with regard to the infiltration of the Earth planetary order. This is being observed and clarified, as is everything concerning the irresponsibility of Earth's humanity in terms of disregarding and breaking the natural laws of nature, all ecosystems, the entire fauna and flora, the atmosphere and the climate. The whole thing concerns a long-term study that has lasted 50 years and has been conducted for 34 years now, under strict conditions of secrecy from earthly armies and peoples as well as from foreigners. The purpose of it all, however, for the Sonar who are leading the whole endeavor, is simply to gain the knowledge of what will ultimately result from it all in order to necessarily prevent such an occurrence should it occur within the Sonayer sphere of influence. Again and again and continuously, Earth's humanity empowers itself for political, private, idealistic, or ethical reasons to break the natural laws of existence of the planet and nature imposed by creation. This corresponds to a wickedly wrong way of thinking and acting in irresponsibility on the part of Earth's humanity, and also in this form to a phenomenon of self-empowerment and self-importance. The whole thing is taking place both in private as well as in society as a whole, which not only seems to be increasing, but has also been a threat to the existence of the planet and the existence of all life for a very long time. In order to avert this imminent and increasingly precarious danger, interdisciplinary action is needed that transcends space and time. A long time ago, various earthly states, rulers, heads of state, companies and private individuals, etc., drew the attention of the Sonayer through very reprehensible violations of planetary laws and laws of nature, because the violation of duty and the refusal to comply with planetary laws and laws of nature led the Sonayer to take clarification measures here on Earth in order to nip this in the bud and render it null and void if it occurred in the Sonayer's area or territories. A detailed investigation is therefore being carried out, with very unpleasant results so far. As I have learnt from Arleon over the last few days, the Sonayer have been investigating the question of how everything could have happened on Earth in ancient times. What lies behind all the rule-breaking by Earth's humanity against planetary laws and the laws of nature? In the process, Arleon and his followers discovered that there is one aspect in which the majority of Earth's humanity has become involved, namely, that it has integrated itself into a religious system that is based on false and unreal fantasies, and also on the fantasy beliefs that have arisen from them, and which has developed from unreal fantasy lies. Following this, a behavior of alienation from real reality, and thus a strict removal and abstention from the truth was formed, whereby a mistrust of everything truthful was formed, and every form of belief was falsely declared as truth and proclaimed in a religious manner. This then very quickly created an immense amount of false justifications, which brought about the faith-based consequences of punishments and evil measures, including the death penalty, if the fantasies and lies were not believed. In the face of great current challenges of very brutal religious wars, persecutions of Jews and Christians as well as other persecutions and murders of religious believers of various faiths, these finally made every delusion of religious belief crisis-proof. And even religious sciences of various disciplines emerged, which since then have vehemently defended their fantasy lies, fantasy declarations, and their hypocritical behavior have since vehemently burdened believers and human society worldwide, forcing them to adopt hostile attitudes based on their various beliefs. The result is that peoples allow themselves to become enemies and wage war against each other, with the believers of one religion wanting to be better than those of other religions, also in the belief that their religion and their beliefs alone are correct.
Exactly, and therefore the view then applies. If you do not want to be my brother, I will smash your head in. But whether it is religious friars or people in power who want to wage wars, sow and create enmity or otherwise cause trouble, the only correct thing would be for them to face each other and beat each other up or smash each other's skulls in, instead of their peoples having to stand on the front line and shoot each other with their supposed enemies, who have never even seen each other, nor do they know each other or have a dispute with each other, and simply shoot each other down. Quarrelers should fight themselves personally and smash each other's skulls if they absolutely, unreasonably want to fight. Consequently, they do not set their peoples against each other and let them fight each other.
Such scum! Excuse me for using your expression, which you used recently, but it is truly appropriate in this case, is cowardly and filled with fear, opting to resolve everything and disputes, etc. personally.
That is unfortunately the case, because such creatures only have a big snout that they can open wide. But there are also those who behave foul-mouthed towards people who are different, as trans people have recently complained, who are sometimes badly cut and even mistreated because of their nature. This is not just mean behavior on the part of the so-called normals. It is depraved, because trans people are completely normal human beings and are also to be treated and valued as such, even if they are knitted differently. But look here, this is what I got.
This is typical for America, because that part of persons of the state leadership as well as an equal part of the population, who go along with all the vile as well as the dangerous machinations of bending the truth and thus distorting the truth of the state leadership, and agree with the injustice in this regard, do not want the truth of their false and criminal state leadership and the equally criminal actions of the U.S. military to become public. But since this man, Julian Assange, worked against exactly that, he is being unlawfully persecuted and imprisoned, and moreover by the U.S.-friendly foreign state of Great Britain, which by its actions violates all law, all order of state rights, as well as internationally established human rights, and completely disregards them, as we fathomed when the Julian Assange case became known to us years ago.
In my opinion, England's actions in equating itself with America is not only a grotto commons and an unparalleled legal offense, which puts England on the exact same criminal level as America, in terms of all the many government crimes, secret service crimes, and military crimes. But that is dangerous to say.
Nevertheless, it is the truth.
Yes, it is the truth. But that is not surprising when you scrutinize the rotten administration of justice in America, which also seems to be rubbing off on England. For there is nothing wrong with it at all. It is dependent on injustice of many kinds. The rights and wrongs of presidents, the military and the Secret Service also play a major role, as do money manipulation, ways and means of sympathy and antipathy, as well as partisanship, relationships, reputation and friendship, aversions in existing or held, that is to say, former state positions, etc. U.S. presidents in particular get off very well for their lies, deceit, and warmongering, because these highborn are not held accountable at all, as has been proven time and again, especially from the years of the World War 1939 to 1945, and since then. Just think of the crime against humanity and world crime committed by U.S. President Harry S. Truman when he ordered the use of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, for which he was never held accountable but was praised. This despite the fact that hundreds of thousands of human beings from the youngest to the oldest were murdered as a result of this atrocity. Also in the Vietnam War, in which South Vietnam, North Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos were involved, and which America officially started in August 1964. About this war, I will say that Ascot told me that America had invented and also spread a purposeful lie that a North Vietnamese torpedo boat had carried out an attack on a U.S. naval ship in the Gulf of Tonkin for absolutely no reason. An unparalleled lie and false report that served the purpose of giving the USA a reason to legally intervene in the Vietnam War, which had been raging as a civil war between capitalist South Vietnam and communist North Vietnam since 1955. The deliberately deceitful lie, which was manufactured under the patronage of U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson, was used by the U.S. military as an opportunity to intervene in the Vietnam War. So America attacked North Vietnam on a massive scale. In 1964, with the war then lasting until 1973, which I followed at times. Of course, Ascot and I were always together, and so she was by my side. And so we saw what was happening there, which was just war atrocities. From their flying apparatus, We saw heinous things and barbaric atrocities committed by the Americans, that is to say, the U.S. military, which I could never forget, and which I still see today when I think about it. The U.S. military not only raped women, but also girls who were certainly not even 10 years old. Once they had done their duty, sometimes whole groups of soldiers raped one woman or girl after another. They were simply shot or stabbed to death. I remember from Ascot's explanations that the North Vietnamese received counseling help and weapons from China and the Soviet Union at the time. The Americans wanted to prevent and block this, which is why the lie of an alleged attack by North Korea on a U.S. naval vessel was invented under the patronage of U.S. President Johnson. America supported South Vietnam then, as it does today. The Americans also stayed in South Vietnam, as they always have wherever they could and can gain a foothold. They also intervened financially and with military advice in South Vietnam, which is of course still the case today. The motivation for all the support given to all countries by America, that is to say, the USA, is solely to be found in the American delusion of hegemony and in the fear of Russia and China. But the fact that America suffered a crushing defeat in the Vietnam War is also due to certain consequences of America's megalomania, which is based on the delusion that it is invincible, but which will be proven otherwise. What further emerged, however, was also the history of lies told by U.S. President George Walker Bush Jr., who, as the 43rd U.S. President,
who won office through electoral fraud, which was known in his deepest inner circle but kept quiet to this day, as we were able to find out. The whole thing had been arranged so cunningly that not even a suspicion of electoral fraud arose. In a slightly different and somewhat clumsier way, this was also done in the case of Donald Trump, DEE.
But that is dangerous to say, because even if America is far away, this has very long legs that also reach here to Switzerland.
If you do not like the fact that you are writing down my statement while recalling our conversation, then CA.
No, that is not my intention, because I just think that U.S. henchmen might take it the wrong way and just... Oh, never mind. It does not matter. I really do not do dots. Then nothing else can be interpreted from such. Earlier I wanted to say that this Bush was nothing but a liar and a cheat, whose lies that Saddam Hussein was building nuclear bombs, and that weapons of mass destruction had been found in Iraq, led the USA to attack Iraq. By attacking Iraq, he provoked the Americans into 2 wars, and then another one in Afghanistan against the Taliban. Saddam Hussein was captured by the Americans and then hanged, although everything Bush claimed was a lie and a fraud. Hussein had no idea to build nuclear bombs, just as he also had no weapons of mass destruction. And the fact that Bush unleashed and carried out the war in Iraq through his lies was absolutely contrary to international law. George W. Bush plunged the Middle East in particular into chaos with his high-handed, mendacious and deceitful claims, which has continued to this day, and has also had such long-term effects that not only has the large terrorist organization Islamic State been operating for a long time, but also Israel and Hamas are now at war with each other. And the fact that, as I have seen together with you, evil war atrocities are being committed on both sides is only attributed to Hamas by partisan idiots.
And the Israeli warmonger Netanyahu is not one iota better than Hitler and Zelensky in Ukraine. And the war crimes that are committed on all sides and not just on one side, which in the Middle East include many rapes of women and girls and then killing them, as you also saw in the Vietnam War, are committed by both warring parties, but this apparently remains hidden from the war reporters. In addition, the atrocities are only reported one-sidedly, while the other party is protected, as is also the case in Ukraine. And that even their own soldiers are shot by their comrades when they no longer want to fight or change fronts, as you have already observed with Bermunda, how in Ukraine human beings were also shot on the spot while searching for things in the rubble. And as I have now seen in the Middle East, many civilians of Palestinian origin have been ruthlessly shot or murdered by the Israeli military, but I have not seen the same on the Palestinian side, and therefore do not know if it is happening there as well. These are war atrocities that are as incomprehensible as the behavior of the effectively degenerate and completely unscrupulous war fanatic Netanyahu. And the fact that America is also interfering in this war and deriving great benefit from it is so clear that there is no need to discuss it, because it is a further advance in the American hegemonic delusion. What needs to be mentioned further? Bush Jr. was not only hated in America in righteous circles because of the election fraud, because it was also because his family of origin was very influential and not very popular. In year 2000, he was declared the winner in the election against the Democrats and the then incumbent Al Gore, the vice president, after a dubious election result, after which he was again elected as U.S. president in 2004. This time, however, he was elected elsewhere. The next U.S. president to be elected was the lawyer Barack Hussein Obama from Honolulu, Hawaii, a U.S. politician of color who was a Democrat and whose father had immigrated from Kenya, our Africa. Obama's election as president was characterized by scandals, and there were 10 opposing candidates waiting in the wings. Obama is a supporter of the death penalty, and thus a wolf in sheep's clothing, because this advocacy contradicts everything he otherwise claimed to be against human discrimination.
War is nothing other than senseless murder, and America is mighty big in that regard. Even when the American War of Independence took place from 1775 to 1783, and Washington had supreme command of the American Revolutionary troops, people were killed without hesitation. George Washington, who was one of the co-founders of America and was the first president, if I'm not mistaken, that was from 1789 to 1797 or so, was an unscrupulous murderer who simply shot an officer of the enemy troops during the war when he rode up accompanied by a few soldiers and armed with a white flag. In other words, with a peace flag, so to speak, and shot him personally before he could even say a word.
This is familiar to me, for Sfath has described this incident in his annals, as well as many other happenings in which you were involved.
Yes, I know, for he was a diligent scribe. I do not really want to hear any more about war and all the atrocities and other incidents, so we should not talk about them anymore. Basically, there is no point and no success with those idiots who live in delusion and believe that the ultimate solution is the military and war, so that peace can be created and maintained. That is why we also have so-called armed neutrality in Switzerland, because the idea prevails among the delusional and lowly intelligent that Switzerland could usefully defend itself if it were attacked by an enemy state. Truly, this is just an absolutely ridiculous belief, because the country would simply be overrun, and it would only bring many deaths, suffering, and misery, and also unparalleled destruction. The military fanatics and those cowardly, fearful people who, in their stupidity, believe that in a war a Swiss army could defend itself against enemy attackers in such a way that the people would be safe or otherwise benefit. This completely insane view, and the even more insane belief in it, is costing the Swiss people billions in pointless money, as in every other country that has crazy people who are enthusiastic about a military army. This is fueled by tax collections for the crazy delusions of military fanatics and other non-thinkers and fantasists, crazy and confused government heads who abuse their might to buy absurd weapons for a completely useless army, even though they have no wise knowledge of war and only fantasize about it. This is also because their intelligentum is obviously still so underdeveloped and not developed enough for them to have a sense of logic and the necessary understanding and reason in and of themselves. The fact that Switzerland was spared from the Nazis in the 1939–1945 World War was not due to the Swiss military, but to the fact that Switzerland was committed to absolute neutrality, which nowadays idiots and other incompetents in the government in Bern want to make a mockery of, by those who flirt treacherously with the EU dictatorship and NATO, young and inexperienced idiots incapable of true thinking who were born long after the war, who did not experience it and did not hear it, as the Nazis announced on the radio, "Little Switzerland, the porcupine, we will take it in retreat." The fact that Adolf Hitler had decisively decreed this because he hoped that he would be able to flee to neutral Switzerland in the event of failure, which no one officially knew, which was provided for, because certain Nazi loyalists had prepared everything for this eventuality, but which then did not materialize because Hitler and Eva Braun were shot by two of his confidants, which was then declared a suicide, but which never reached the public as reality and truth. That is why it is still assumed and claimed that Hitler committed suicide and took Eva Braun with him to her death. But if those in power in Bern truly do not realize, regardless of their age, profession, standing and gender, and regardless of the fact that they were born long after the World War between 1939 and 1945 and did not witness what actually happened, that Switzerland fully needs its absolute neutrality and must uphold it, then the only thing that can prevail in their minds is absolute idiocy, because from their earliest adolescence they have been subject to an intelligent defect of the most severe degree, which only allows them to think and act in an erroneous and confused way, and which is also religiously conditioned and therefore deviant in relation to reality. This is also because they have an office in the government, which they are unable to exercise in a righteous and responsible manner due to their idiocy, because righteousness is not inherent in them, nor in their supporters. However, it is not only here in Switzerland that such rulers are in office, but in practically every one of the world's 200 or so countries. This is despite the fact that the misrulers, like the righteous rulers, generally pocket around 10 times as much as the normal tax-paying citizen earns per month from honest and hard work, from which they also have to pay taxes, also for the unrighteous among the righteous rulers. What I want to say now is that all righteousness means nothing of value to those lowly intelligent and therefore non-thinking people. Because low intelligence is nothing other than non-thinking, which is only characteristic of the sick idiots who indulge in sham thinking and have nothing to do with the righteous rulers, who sit in governments and think that they are the greatest and probably also the cleverest and most valuable. Of course, all those who are righteous are exempt from this, although they themselves know that they are righteous and should also not feel affected and should not be counted among the unrighteous. That the unrighteous human beings are not quite normal and sick of thinking and therefore only pseudo-thinkers, as a rule still religious and hostile as well as biased. Consequently, they suffer from an intelligence defect of the most severe degree, that is beyond doubt. On the contrary, in the jungles of South America and in the Far East, together with Svath, I have experienced natives, so-called savages and primitives, as they are called by the so-called civilized, who were normal thinking and peaceful in every wise, and knew neither war nor killing nor strife, but only true peace. I have never experienced any quarreling among these primitives, not even among family members. Only with cannibals was it significantly different, because there was usually a certain aggressiveness among them, at least among those who took prisoners, killed them, and ate them. However, this aggressiveness was not hate-related. This, while other tribes were much more peaceful, who only ate their dead, as is also still the case today, as I know of at least 2 tribes.
Svath also wrote about this. He gave a particularly remarkable description of an incident you experienced together in the past. In his annals, there is talk of a tribe of cannibals in an area in the east where very large human beings lived. You were there together before.
Ah, yes, I think I know what you are talking about. The description probably refers to a land where today there are only islands, because the empire has sunk into the sea or something. The area there was vast land, but also had a large jungle where a tribe of cannibals lived that I met with Svath. But they were peaceful, and only ate those of their own tribe when they died. They did not wage any wars or raids, and I also do not know if there were any other cannibal tribes or other natives living in the jungle. But there was a large city far outside the jungle where really big giants lived, actually giants, like Andron is, 5 to 6 meters tall. I do not remember what Svath called them and where they came from, but as far as I know it is said today that there was a country called Mu. But if it really was the land where Svath and I were then there really is nothing left of it. As I saw in the 1940s when Svath and I went to see what it looks like today, and how everything has changed since we were there about 2 or 3 decades ago in the past. If it really is that area, then there are really only a few islands there today, because everything has sunk into the sea. And the giants, or the giants who lived there, must have left when the area presumably disappeared into the sea. Elsewhere, together with Svath in the Far East in the 1940s, I also got to know 2 cannibal tribes who were warlike, raided neighboring tribes, took prisoners, and then killed and ate them. Svath and I also made friends with a cannibal tribe who did not eat their own dead, but placed them in their smoke-filled huts and left them to dry out. Those who were mummified in this wise were revered and, over time, accumulated correct layers of soot. But these remained in the huts for as long as they existed. It happened that they even survived 2 or 3 generations, although it must be said that these cannibals, like others, also did not grow old, so another generation quickly followed. I seem to remember that according to Svatha's findings, no human being lived to be more than 38 years old, after which they died very old.
That may really have been the case, because I remember Svath writing something like that.
Yes, he certainly wrote that down, because he was doing studies in that regard, so it was probably the case that he also wrote a lot about it. But now for something else. Every now and then they show footage on TV of balls of light that are seen floating somewhere high up in the air during the day or at night and spinning around. These are then labeled as UFOs in the false belief that they are extraterrestrial flying objects. I am often asked about this, but when the lights are described, I understand that they can only be small or large orbs, that is to say plasma balls or some kind of natural gas balls. These can be very small, but they can also be quite large and even several or even many meters in diameter. A man from Japan keeps sending me photos of such small gas objects, which are actually called orbs, which he photographs and claims that they are spirits of the deceased. He really lives in this delusion and does not allow himself to be taught. He even thinks that Uplearen and the Sonair, and also I, are wrong because they really are spirits of the deceased.
Faith, unfortunately, is a delusion that suppresses reality and its truth to such an extent that even violent death is endured for it.
Unfortunately, that is the case, yes. This is also known from many female and male martyrs of faith who have been massacred, quartered, tortured, burned, drowned, strangled, wheeled, stabbed and killed and eaten by predators, etc., for their delusions of faith. I would also like to present you with this article, which you should read.
All of what you said, these are events that have taken place here on Earth, which I have read a lot about over the last few weeks. But now it is time for me to fulfill my obligations. But first I want to read what you give me here.
Population growth, a key problem of our time statement by the Population Policy Initiative on the occasion of the UN Climate Change Conference in Dubai COP28, ECO News, the Green Press Agency Press Office. ECO News Germany, D81371 Munich Category, Politics and Society Date, 27.11. 2023.
In addition to binding, sanction-backed agreements for a rapid and significant reduction in greenhouse gases, and financial aid to combat the consequences of climate change, we believe it is urgently necessary to make the continuing high rate of population growth the subject of the negotiations. The rich industrialized countries in particular have a duty to contribute to the preservation of our natural resources by reducing their consumption of resources in absolute terms. However, guaranteeing humane living conditions worldwide also requires resolute measures to curb population growth. We have explained our position in this regard in more detail in our enclosed declaration. We appeal to political decision makers to take action to include this important aspect. Without a reduction in population growth, neither ecological sustainability nor social justice can be achieved.
Introduction.
We are 3 authors, speakers, and activists who have been publishing and active in the fields of ecology, economics, and social policy for decades. See also the short vitae at the end of this text. One of us, Saral Sarkar, an Indian citizen who spent the first 45 years of his life in India and has lived in Germany since 1982, knows the realities of life and the different approaches from both worlds, that of a developing and emerging country and that of a rich industrialized country, very well. While the many symptoms of the ecological and humanitarian crises are becoming increasingly apparent, it is astonishing that a very significant and basically obvious contributory cause is hardly mentioned. A population that continues to grow very strongly globally, and especially in many crisis areas. As is no doubt well known, the global population recently passed the 8 billion human beings mark. We are aware that when analyzing the causes of the various crises, we must not limit ourselves to population growth, and that this sensitive issue requires a cautious approach. Nevertheless, we believe that this topic is clearly underestimated and underexposed. There is practically no public discourse on the subject, which tends to be suppressed and hushed up. We ask you to read and reconsider our position, which is summarized in the following. We look forward to your feedback, your support, and your action in favor of our positions.
The problem.
The world's population continues to grow rapidly, by an impressive 85 to 90 million human beings per year. Figuratively speaking, the world is growing by 1 Germany or 10 Austrians per year, at least in relation to the population of these countries. What kind of houses will these additional human beings live in? What will they eat? How will they be mobile? What jobs will they have if they have any at all? Will they even have the chance and the material means to lead a successful and decent life? This growth is taking place on a groaning planet, on which the limits to growth have already been reached, as many indicators point out. The ecosphere on which we as the Homo sapiens species and all other species depend for their survival has already been severely affected. The growth of the world's population goes hand in hand with the various pressures on our natural environment, such as greenhouse gas emissions, soil consumption, and the use of mineral and biogenic resources. It would of course be wrong to blame population growth alone for these pressures. But it would also be just as wrong to ignore and play down its significance. Since the beginning of industrialization, the level of consumption per capita has grown even faster than the world population. But both driving forces together are exerting massively increasing pressure on the ecosphere and our planetary resource base. It is also becoming very clear that technological innovations alone will not be nearly enough to save us, even if many or most people do not want to admit it. For example, the energy transition that many people are in favor of and striving for will not be implemented in the expected planned way. On closer inspection, this project has too many weaknesses, dilemmas, and limitations. Ultimately, long-term survival and also a reasonably good life can only be possible in a post-growth society, whatever form this may take. A post-growth society means that, on the one hand, population growth must come to an end and should even shrink to a significantly lower, more sustainable level, but also that material consumption per capita cannot remain at the current high level and must therefore also shrink significantly. Although this reduction in per capita consumption applies primarily to the rich countries in the so-called global north, it also applies to quite a few human beings in the emerging and developing countries who have already achieved a relatively high standard of living. And it also applies because the hopes of most human beings in these countries for a high material standard of living cannot be realized. And if they are, then only at the high price of further damage to and destruction of the local and global natural environment. Without a halt to population growth, and subsequently also a decline in the world's population, sustainable, ecologically compatible development will not be possible. Either this shrinkage is brought about in a conscious, deliberate way, or it happens in a disorganized, chaotic manner in the form of the collapse of societies. It is no coincidence that many conflicts and wars take place in regions where the population has been growing almost unchecked for a long time. The Middle East conflict, which has recently flared up again, also has a strong demographic component, even if this is not the focus of reporting and analyses. Like so much else in the world, population dynamics are also very uneven. While there are some regions that have already achieved a demographic transition, that is to say where the population is no longer growing or may even be declining, there are other regions where the population is still growing massively, and a demographic transition is also not clearly recognizable. Sub-Saharan Africa is a particular hotspot in this respect. UN forecasts predict that the population in this region will at least triple by 2100. Given the instability and the multitude of problems that already exist in this large region, this outlook of a population multiplication in the coming decades can only be understood as a demographic catastrophe. A catastrophe that the global community is largely watching helplessly and inactively. But there are also unsustainable, problematic developments in other regions of the world. For example, the population of India, now the most populous country in the world, is growing by around 14 million per year. This means that more than 15% of global population growth is taking place in this country alone.
And the solution? Is there one at all?
If we now recognize the fundamental correctness of this outline of the problem, at least to a large extent or in key areas, many questions arise. What can be done? Is it even possible to influence the development of the population, especially if the human beings concerned live in distant geographical regions and also in other cultures? Is it even legitimate for us in the global North or West to think about what others' countries, regions, groups of human beings should or may do? Is this not perhaps presumptuous and inappropriate in view of a colonial past characterized by exploitation? And have not examples of population policy from the past shown that this is inherently reactionary and inhumane? Despite all the concerns and objections, we think it is time to overcome this defensive stance and bring the taboo topics of population, population growth, and population policy out of the taboo zone. Curbing population growth is not only a planetary necessity, but is also in the interest of the countries concerned, which are overburdened in every respect by a rapidly growing population. Population policy is not reactionary from the outset. As in other policy fields, it also depends on the specific form it takes. The highest possible degree of participation, education, and self-empowerment of human beings, which relies on their maturity, prevents abuse. There are already encouraging examples of this here and there, such as the educational work of Hermione Quenham in Benin.
So what can be done?
Where could there be concrete starting points for initiatives? 1. Make it a topic, make it visible. We are aware that it is particularly difficult for politicians from rich countries with a former colonial past to address this issue publicly. But they have the opportunity to point out the urgency of the issue to counterparts in countries in the global south in direct conversations. Clarity in communication is important. For example, by making it clear that high numbers of children do not mean more wealth, but on the contrary, even more poverty and even more underdevelopment. And that it is not just evil might from outside that is causing underdevelopment and a lack of prospects in these regions, but that there is also a relevant homegrown contribution to this, and that this includes, first and foremost, high population growth. politicians from countries in the north can offer to financially support programs with population policy content in the problem countries see also point to. In addition, there are many ways of making the problem of population growth visible at various levels. At grassroots level through NGOs at local, regional, and global level, within the framework of UN organizations, through international conferences at which corresponding initiatives, measures, and encouraging examples are presented, etc. Above all, it must be clearly emphasized that the commitment to preserving our livelihoods and a healthy environment is closely linked to a sensible population policy. 2. Reorientation of development cooperation. In our view, a very effective starting point is a reorientation of development cooperation. Funds for development aid or development cooperation can be allocated depending on the existence of population policy or on the effectiveness of any existing population policy. Population policy measures C.3 themselves require funding, a large proportion of which must presumably come from outside. Such earmarked funds would be among the most effective types of development aid. The establishment of monitoring, support, and counseling mechanisms also requires external financial support. 3. Population policy measures. There is a whole range of non-repressive measures that have also already been trialed in various countries. These include awareness and education programs, especially for young women and girls, positive campaigning, for example, advertising for small families for two-child families, as was also done in India in the 1970s. Free access to contraceptives, financial incentives for voluntary sterilization of men and women, state guarantee of an old age pension for the poorer classes, which is linked to not having children beyond the age of 2, establishment of counseling and support structures as part of development cooperation, see also point 2.
Who we are.
Population Policy Initiative, Dr. Bruno Kern, born 1958, author, translator, lecturer. Published books including Das Märchen vom grünen Wachstum, 2019. Lives and Works in Mainz. Saral Sarkar, born 1936, in West Bengal, India, lived in India until 1982, then in Cologne. Author and activist. His publications include Eco-Socialism or Eco-Capitalism, A Critical Analysis of Humanity's Fundamental Choices, 1999. Dr. Ernst Schriefel, born 1969, works in a technical office for building physics and energy efficiency. Also active as a journalist. Book Ökobilanz, 23. Lives and Works in Vienna. Permission for reuse in a FIGU organ, granted on 5 December 2023 by Dr. Bruno Kern.
What do you say to that?
I want to talk to you about that when I get back, because now I really have to go and do my duty. Goodbye, Edward, my friend. So see you later.
Then take good care of yourself, and see you soon. Take care, Ketzel.